Good morning and good afternoon, dear friends. We're going on with the book reading project, What is Zen? Plain Talk for a Beginner's Mind, written by Suketsu Norman Fischer and Susan Moon Sensei. Chapter after chapter, one chapter a week, more or less, sometimes half chapters. Our last chapter was named Over the Long Haul, and I think we also had to cut it in. No, this one I have read in one piece, and before we had stages of practice, so it's a wonderful project. I can just say this. So, and one really gets excited, and I would like to have a discussion around after that, but one where everybody has the good opportunity to speak. So like counsel, like good circle work, like I love that because the wisdom of the people is people attending and having listened to such a dense, rich chapter is amazing, and the people trigger each other to bring it out. But this doesn't seem the right time to do that. I hope to live some further years to manifest this or that of my visions. So let us start. I'm not sure if I will read the whole thing. Could happen, but afterwards I will attend a talk myself, though maybe it's a little bit too much. Sangha. Susan Moon is asking, what does Sangha really mean, and who gets to be in it? Is it limited to our fellow practitioners at our particular Zen center? Can it include our friends and family as well? Does it include all sentient beings? That's a nice idea, but then how can it be a community if everybody is in it? Can the whole universe be a community? I think excellent questions. Who has not asked this in this way or another, him or herself? Norman Fischer answers, the word Sangha, in brackets, now a word that appears in English language dictionaries, means community. As we have said earlier, in Buddhism, the most basic form of commitment is taking refuge in the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. Throughout most of Buddhist history, the word Sangha referred to the community of ordained disciples, monastics, who had made lifetime vows to live a Buddhist lifestyle, practicing every day and sharing their lives with others. Most widely, the word Sangha is used in Mahayana Buddhism, means, as you said, the community of all beings. So yes, in answer to your question, Sangha is all of the above. It includes, of course, the people you practice Zen with, whether they are ordained or not, as well as others in your life, family and friends, and all beings. Maybe one good way to think about this is to distinguish between the relative and the absolute. In the relative sense, Sangha is the people you practice Zen with. Maybe here we could also include family and friends, people you regularly interact with. In the absolute sense, Sangha is all sentient beings. As the first of the four great vows, regularly chanted in Zen places, says, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them. So yes, all sentient beings are Sangha, and in Zen even beings we normally call insentient, Dogen's roof tiles and grasses, for example, are included in the category of sentient beings. If you only resonate with the absolute meaning of Sangha, universal and inspiring, broad, wide and open, then maybe you love all of humanity and the whole earth, but you actually can't stand people, especially when they congregate in groups, and most especially when they congregate in spiritual groups. I know a lot of people who feel exactly like this. They feel a part of the universal spiritual Sangha, but would never set foot inside a Buddhist or any other spiritual practice place. On the other hand, if you only believe in your Sangha of Zen friends, maybe extended to family and close friends, then you will quickly, like many religious people, find yourself insulated by your community's point of view. Consciously or not, you will see others as outsiders, people who just don't get it, and this will eventually lead you down a path of exclusivity. So clearly we have to see that these perspectives, the relative and the absolute, require one another. To really feel that all sentient beings are your Sangha, you need to ground this in actual encounter with actual people, with all the dicey problems this will bring. And to really be able, in a healthy way, to be a member of a concrete Sangha, you need to see that the people in the room are not limited to the people in the room. In these few are the many. And to really love one person or one group of people is in truth to love everyone. This is an impossible ideal. But it is something we always have to keep in mind and heart and aspire to. Susan's question. Why do we do everything together in Zen practice? We start eating at exactly the same moment. We do walking meditation in a line together, like kindergarten children. We chant in unison. We bow together. We wear similar clothing. Norman's answer. Yes, Zen is together practice. We Americans aren't used to that and typically don't like it. We affirm individuality, not togetherness. We pride ourselves in our autonomy and freedom to do and express in our own way. So participating in a practice that seems to require full conformity, doing everything together in the same way, at the same pace, even standing and walking in prescribed postures while wearing the same kind of clothing, goes against the grain. There is certainly something valuable in our national obsession with individualism, which we understand as personal freedom, a universal human right. As an American, I share this value, but I have hung around with European and Asian people who, while perhaps admiring American individualism, also see it as a little callow, adolescent perhaps. Becoming an individual, insisting on individual expression, is in fact the job of adolescents, who are in the stage of life in which forging an independent self is the most important thing. Later in life, having forged that self, other things like community, kindness, compassion become more important. I have the feeling that my European and Asian friends see American culture as still young. We are just beginning. European and Asian cultures are much older, with a much more palpable sense of the past, which is present for them, literally, every day, in the buildings and in the streets. American culture is an adolescent culture. Adolescents have lots of energy to try new things, impossible things. They have idealism, courage, even recklessness. On the other hand, adolescents lack depth, wisdom, probity. So it might not be a bad thing for us to learn how to temper out our individualism with community, not to insist so much on our own expression, our own viewpoint, our own way of doing things. Suzuki Roshi, Suzuki Roshi had a lot to say on this point. As an old-school Japanese, born in 1904, who also apparently had a lively sense of the new, he appreciated his young baby boomer hippie students. They had true beginner's mind. At the same time, though, they were limited by their ideology of individualism. They suffered for it. So he had to do a lot of talking to convince them that they should wear dark, plain clothing in the zendo and robes at Tasahara, that they should learn how to stand and walk in the zendo, and how to chant and bow in the proper way. Fortunately, he was such a kind and impressive person and appeared so exotic and enlightened that they believed him and were willing to do what he asked. Besides, that first generation of Zen students was pretty alienated from American culture. We were against the war in Vietnam, against consumerism. We wanted a more natural and a kinder life. And we believed that Asian cultures had figured out a better way to live and to see the world. That predisposed us to suspend our prejudices and do what Suzuki Roshi was suggesting. Practicing together in harmonious community without emphasizing individuality expands your sense of self to include others. It makes you appreciate your individuality not as something unique and better than or worse than that of others, but rather as an expression of something fundamental and universal in human beings. And this makes you gentler and more flexible in your view of and interactions with others. It's one thing to have this idea, and another to literally train in it every day in the zendo. When you train in it, it goes deep into the body and from the body into the mind and heart. Suzuki Roshi once said that when he saw all of us lined up in proper Zen posture, wearing proper Zen clothing, he could then and only see our true, unforced individuality. I have come to appreciate this. It is literally the case. Most of what we take to be individuality is conceptual. That is, we form, whether consciously or not, a concept of a self we want to advance, and then we act out that concept. In Zen practice, the effort is to let go of the self-concept and live from the gut, from the breath, from the body, from deep conditioning, that is, from our inmost, non-conceptual, unforced individuality, just ourselves as we are, without posturing. What a relief. Excuse me. Susan answers the next question. Yes, and isn't there something happens when we do something in unison? Don't we become part of something bigger than our individual selves? Doing Kinhin, which is a walking meditation, I felt like part of a giant caterpillar. Norman. Yes, that's right. Once you get over your resistance to it, there's a great beauty and sense of belonging in doing things together. You feel the transcendence that comes from it was for a short time the pic went off, but now I can see myself and I hope you can see me as well. So let me see where we were. You feel the transcendence that comes from dropping your sense of separateness for a moment and feeling yourself as one part of a shared body practicing as one. It's a wonderful feeling that must be experienced to be appreciated. I feel it often during services when all of a sudden we begin to chant in one voice. Even though we are not necessarily practiced vocalists, there is a beauty to our chanting that is very moving. Susan. Does Zen value each person's unique individual nature or only each person's universal nature with all the corners filed off? Norman. It's not one or the other. Inevitably it's both. The phrase you use here, with all the corners filed off, reminds me of the old saying that practicing Zen in community is like putting a bunch of sharp rocks in a tumbler. As they gently, or not so gently, bump into each other again and again, they smooth off one another's edges. While there is truth in this metaphor, it implies that there is a bit of violence and forced conformity involved, that the sharpness of our personalities will take hits until we will all become docile and smooth. There are two sides to this. On one hand, practicing Zen in community for a long time does make you a smoother character, more tolerant of others. It makes you less difficult, less prickly, and this is a good thing. Human beings are always doing things in groups, and if there is in a group someone who is in this sense smooth, it helps make the group smoother, more harmonious, more loving. On the other hand, my experience is that people who practice Zen for a long time become more and more rather than less and less themselves, as I was saying when we were talking about Isan. These days many people see Buddhism as a kind of character improvement course. But my impression is that Zen practice doesn't necessarily improve a person's character. Zen history and contemporary Zen culture is full of characters. People who, while faithfully practicing all the good Dharma virtues, do so in their own way, with all their roughness seemingly intact. Zen's teaching of true self seems to produce adepts who are not afraid to express themselves as they are, edges and all, yet somehow to do this kindly, without excessive self-attachment. So I would say that Zen does deeply value the individual as individual, despite its seemingly unindividualistic methods. So it is very American. But being an individual Zen style isn't a matter of willfulness or arrogance. You don't separate yourself from others. You appreciate yourself as a particular expression of the Buddha nature we all share. Question by Susan Moon. What if a person who is lonely, single, and lives alone, without family, joins a Zen center for the company in order to feel a sense of belonging? What if she likes the Sangha potlucks more than sitting Zazen? Norman's answer. To me, the sense of belonging you refer to is beautiful and profound. We all live with people every day, constantly interacting with them everywhere, in the grocery store, on the bus, on the telephone, in our thoughts. So why should anyone, even a single person who lives alone, feel lonely, feel a need for belonging? We are surrounded by people all the time. And yet, yes, of course, we can feel very alone. The need for belonging is one of the deepest of all human needs, maybe as deep as the need for food. It seems to me that this need goes to the heart of why human beings have always practiced some form of communal religious life in virtually all times and places. As we were saying a moment ago, religious practices and forms evoke a deep sense of belonging. If religious need is deep human need, then the need for belonging is a religious need. So the person who comes to practice not for Zazen or Zen teaching, but for the potluck and the sense of community is as worthy a Zen practitioner as any other. She, like everyone else, is participating with Buddha, Dharma and Sangha to meet her deepest human needs. In fact, in my years of Zen practice, I have encountered many practitioners like this, who have come for and have been healed by community. Spiritual communities, like other communities, are basically just people doing something together, but in spiritual community there is an explicit commitment to sharing life with whoever comes to do the practice. This is essential to the Buddhist idea of Sangha. Whoever comes is a member of the community. Whoever means everyone and anyone, regardless of social class, race, sexual orientation, or acceptability of appearance, personality, or point of view. Maybe this is an ideal that is not always realized, but it is an explicit commitment. Sangha members understand this, so they make an effort to respect everyone, however successful or unsuccessful they may be in such efforts. So when the theoretically sad and lonely person of your question comes to the Sangha, she will find that she is accepted and valued for what she is. I hope she will be warmly welcomed on the first day she shows up. But what's more important is how she will be accepted 5 years later. In that 5 years, the practice will have influenced her somehow. She will have done some Zazen, she will have heard some teachings, and she will have, simply by rubbing shoulders with Sangha members, absorbed much of what the tradition values. And she will be providing a very valuable teaching for the rest of the community. Zen isn't really about Zazen and koans. It is about how we live, who we are, and how we treat others. You might think I'm making all this up, that the real Japanese Zen is all about heart-long Zazen and penetrating understanding of Buddhist texts, and that I am at this point in my life an old softie. Yes, you can find Zen places that emphasize heart, Zazen and Sesshin practice. Places where your lonely woman without a family would wait a long time before the first potluck. But remember, in Japan, most Zen priests train at a monastery for a relatively short period of time, and then they return to their home temples, where they have a lot of potlucks and memorial services, where they're council members and take care of people, mostly without much time for Zazen. When Zen was first introduced to America by Japanese teachers, it was the Zazen and the Sesshin training that was emphasized, because this was what young American students wanted and needed, and what the teachers most valued and wanted to offer. But now, 50 years later, we can appreciate more what actually goes on in Japan. I have spent time at Rinzo Inn, Suzuki Roshi's original temple in Japan, where Suzuki Roshi's son Hoitsu Suzuki has been abbot for many decades. My visits there have been lovely, quiet and simple. Yes, we have done Zazen. The Zendo is tiny and only sits a few people. But mostly we have cleaned, cooked and witnessed the interaction with community members who live down the mountain from the temple and who come from time to time for social visits and family remembrances. There is a scene in a wonderful Akira Kurosawa film, which is named Rhapsody in August, 1991, in which two old women who have lived through the Pacific War we call it World War II, sit in a tiny country temple chanting the Heart Sutra together. They then remain together for a long time, sitting in silence. The temple is surrounded by an open grassy field, yellow grass tips shushing in the breeze. For me, this scene expresses Zen, silent belonging, on an expressive surrounding earth, with a powerful wordless sense of the tragic human past we have all shared. This then fully includes your lonely woman without a family. Susan is asking, I've heard people say that they went to practice Zazen at a Zen center for months without anyone ever greeting them. Some people like this because they don't have to chit-chat, and after Zazen they can just leave and get on with their day. But some people feel lonely and left out when this happens. Do you think Zen communities in the West have a culture of self-possession, non-intrusiveness, silent poise, letting each person face their demons on their own, which can look like unfriendliness? Norman, and this is the last part, so some minutes. Maybe it's true that most Zen communities are as you describe. I don't know. People certainly used to complain about this years ago at the San Francisco Zen Center. It is likely that compared to the average church or synagogue, the average Zen place is, as you say, more subdued, less forthcoming with greetings or overt friendliness for newcomers. This makes sense. Since Zen centers uniquely offer the chance for people to be silent, to be left profoundly alone, and to be quietly supported by others in that endeavor, when you come to a Zen place, you will sense the quiet and the invitation to practice silence as much as, and probably more than the offer of friendship, which is there too, of course. The friendship and support generally come later, naturally, as you warm up to the place. Sitting together in silence for relatively long periods of time is something you need to want to do for its own and your own sake. I'm not sure that someone does you a service by encouraging you to practice Zazen if it isn't something you need to do. So in most Zen Sanghas, people will gently guide you to the practice without much urging or fanfare. I have always appreciated that Zen places allow you to come and go freely without pressure. You can easily be anonymous for a while if you want to, but people are friendly and helpful when you ask. Probably the sort of atmosphere I'm describing may seem intimidating and off-putting to some. I don't know if you could hear the sound. Let's make it a bit stronger. My bow is directed, of course, to Buddha. You see it in my back at the altar, but also to the two authors, Norman Fischer and Susan Moon, and to the auditorium today with Andreas von Schreven and Heike Sartorius. Thank you for being here. Lovely. I hope you could enter the thread, so to speak, and I think we have only three chapters left. So next time there will be the chapter Everyday Life and Everyday Relationships. I think that's very interesting as every chapter. Very interesting because it is the name giver to the every Zen foundation, Everyday Zen Foundation. And I am not sure, I think I cannot do it next Saturday. I will let you know on Facebook at which time. Maybe I have to drop it in the next week. Can happen. So I hope you enjoyed this. Plain talk for a beginner's mind. Thank you for attending. And let me know if you want, if there is some interest to go deeper, because I'm planning something. It's not fixed. I would prefer to do it together with other also interested souls, so that one picks a sentence or a chapter or a certain, how shall I put, clue, a certain thing that seems outstanding or so, or a bit provocative even, and then to share what's coming up, the resonance to it, just to deepen the book. I think it's really from my perspective, which is really not the widest, but just for me, it is the best book about Zen I have read until now. If you want to be informed about the foundation, what is offered, then you go to www.everydayzen.org. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.